You know, there's a hidden language in every single comic book you've ever read. Nope, it's not in the word balloons or the giant pow sound effects. It's in the very bones of the page, the grid. Today, we're going to decode that language and look at the invisible rules that shape our favorite stories.
I mean, have you ever really stopped and just looked at the page? The boxes, the panels, all those little white spaces in between? It's so easy to think they're just, containers for the art. But what if they're so much more than that?
Because here's the thing. That layout, that structure, it's a deliberate choice. It's a language all on its own, and it is absolutely critical to how a story feels, how it breathes, and ultimately what it's trying to say.
Now, the technical term for all this is formalism. The best way to think about it is like the architecture of the comic book page. It's not just about what the characters are doing in the picture, it's about the frame itself. It's the invisible hand guiding your eyes and your emotions through the story.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by unpacking the most famous formal structure out there, the iconic 9-panel grid. Then we'll see how the legendary Watchmen totally mastered it, and how a modern comic, Peter Cannon Thunderbolt, came along and completely turned it on its head, making the grid itself a kind of magic.
All right, let's start with the absolute foundation, the 9-panel grid. It is the perfect case study for understanding just how powerful a simple set of rules can be in the right hands.
It's exactly what it sounds like. 3 rows, 3 columns, 9 perfectly equal boxes on a page. Seems pretty restrictive, right? Kind of rigid? Well, that restriction is its secret weapon.
So, what's the big deal? Why is this simple grid so incredibly powerful? Well, for one, it creates this steady, predictable rhythm. It's intuitive. Reading it feels like tapping your foot to a beat. Then there's the story structure. Every single page becomes a mini story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Over time, it's become so fundamental that it feels like the very DNA of comics. And on a pure design level, it lines up perfectly with the rule of thirds, giving every page this natural, built-in visual balance.
And nobody, and I mean nobody, mastered this restrictive power better than Alan Moore did in Watchmen. This is where the 9-panel grid went from being just a layout to a profound storytelling statement.
Moore was completely, almost obsessively devoted to the grid. He took his massive, sprawling, chaotic story and locked it inside this rigid cage. And the effect is just brilliant. It creates this feeling of inevitability, like a clock is ticking down, and every single moment, no matter how big or how small, is given the exact same weight.
I mean, think about it. When you picture Watchmen, you probably think of that bloody smiley face button, right? Well, the argument here is that the 9-panel grid is just essential to its identity. It's not just a frame, it's a symbol for the entire comics philosophy of control, order, and doom.
Exactly. It is the steady, rhythmic, inescapable beat that drives the whole story forward. It's the drumbeat of fate.
Okay, so let's fast forward a few decades. A writer named Kieron Gillen comes along and creates Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. Now, this comic doesn't just use the grid, it starts a direct conversation with Watchmen about the grid.
This book is such a fascinating animal because it's all of these things at once. It's taking Watchmen apart to see how it works, sure, but it's also making fun of it, criticizing it, and, at the same time, paying it this incredible amount of respect. It's a really complex and clever response. And the first step to really getting this conversation is to realize that the characters themselves are direct echoes of the Watchmen cast. This isn't just about plot. It's a story built on layers and layers of inspiration.
Okay, stick with me, because this is where it gets really interesting. The Watchmen characters were themselves based on older heroes from Charlton Comics. Ozymandias was based on a hero named Peter Cannon, Rorschach was the Question, and so on. So what Gillen does is he goes back to the original Peter Cannon and then creates new versions of the rest of the Watchmen cast. It's a reflection of a reflection, a story talking to another story about its own family tree.
But this is where Gillen makes his most incredible leap. He doesn't just copy the form of Watchmen. He takes that form, the grid itself, and makes it a literal part of the story's reality.
All right, get ready for the truly mind-bending part. The 9-panel grid is no longer just a way to arrange pictures on a page. In the world of Peter Cannon, it becomes a tangible, physical force. It's like the source code of their reality, and these characters have figured out how to hack it.
And this is literally how it works in the comic. Peter Cannon discovers that he can travel through the multiverse by drawing a panel on a wall and just stepping through it.
He realizes he's a character in a comic book, and he weaponizes that knowledge. He's not just escaping his universe, he's escaping the very panel he's been drawn in.
And of course, the villain of the story, an evil version of canon from another dimension, has totally mastered this. The rules of formalism are his superpower. He can literally summon a comic book panel to block an attack. He can sneak through the gutters, the white space between the panels, to ambush people. The very structure of the page becomes his weapon.
And that right there is the ultimate difference. In Watchmen, the grid is an outside force that controls the story, giving it that relentless, marching pace. But in Peter Cannon, the characters reach out, grab the grid, and make it the central engine of the plot itself.
So what's the point of all this meta-commentary? Why do all this? It boils down to this incredibly bold and surprisingly hopeful statement. It's not saying Watchmen is bad. It's challenging its massive influence.
The message is that for more than 30 years, creators have been living in the long shadow of this one masterpiece. Peter Cannon argues that the way out isn't to ignore it or to just copy it. The way out is to understand its rules so well that you can take them apart and build something totally new. It's a conversation across decades, using the very language of comics to have that conversation.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? If a structure as simple as a 9-panel grid can be used to control time, build worlds, and even become a form of magic, what other invisible rules of storytelling are just sitting out there, waiting for the right creator to come along and shatter them completely?